Faces dropped on another edition of Soccer Down Here. You will notice that John is not here with us in video form. He is here with us in picture form, but he is with us in audio form from Valdosta.
Yes. Here for shoot for Georgia Public Broadcasting, catching up with college from a high school coach here in the area on a bunch of different topics, and it'll be up and running on the platform in a bunch of different ways coming up in the next couple of weeks.
On the Georgia Public Broadcasting platform or platforms.
Yes. Check.
All right. Lots of things to get into today. You can join the conversation a lot of different ways. It's a Tuesday Thoughts edition of the show, so you can share your thoughts with us on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. You can share your thoughts with us via email, soccerdownhere@gmail.com. You can also send us a direct message if you want to do that on Twitter. That's easier for you. You can also join us on the Twitch pitch, twitch.tv/soccerdownhere. All right. Lots of, I think international breaks get weird because there's always big picture things that come up, little things that come up in the midst of an international break that are complicated to deal with. We get the national team matches themselves, which will be interesting on a number of fronts in this window. But we also get almost like some resets at times and conversations that look at what's happened, what's got us to this point, what's coming next. And it feels like some of that is what's going on at the beginning of this international break. I guess one of the big things that I've seen this morning out of England is this back and forth jousting about 5 substitutions. The Premier League they had votes on it twice, and it was voted down, and the Premier League has said it was voted down strongly. They are the only major league in the world that I am aware of that is not allowing 5 substitutions.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I mean, they didn't want to let referees go to pitchside monitors either, so they obviously know better than the rest of us. Some of the arguments are completely and utterly valid. Sheffield United, for example, has come out and been very clear in saying we do not want 5 subs. We remain suspicious that big clubs simply want to be able to sub off players to rest them to keep them fresh. The bigger the club, the stronger the bench.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any change of rules midseason will clearly affect the integrity of the league. That is accurate. The 20 clubs have voted not once but twice to reject 5 subs. The bigger clubs managed to find a way to have the vote held a second time, and again they lost. So far this season, clubs playing in Europe have endured a similar workload to clubs in the Championship, and we don't hear them complaining, do we? Do we? I haven't really paid attention to the Championship if they're complaining. I
haven't heard any.
I think the Championship has always complained about the number of games that they've played. Like, I've never heard them say, yes, we like to play so many games. Don't they always talk about how it is the most difficult, and it's such an accomplishment.
Schedule.
It's so hard. Well, that's kind of complaining, Sheffield United. And by the way, if you don't pick things up, you might be playing that schedule next year. Just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Here at Bramall Lane, we have not seen an increase in muscle injuries. That's just asking for trouble, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are you trying to jinx it? I mean, the PFA, the Professional Footballers Association, has backed the calls for 5 subs. We told the Premier League that we would support such a move on health and safety grounds for our members before the first vote, and our position has not changed. Chris Sutton, who's a pundit for BT and BBC, on Twitter tweeted this morning. If Pep, Jurgen, and Ole all care so much about player welfare, then they'd rest their key men more. Big clubs happy to take TV riches, buy the best players, pay the biggest wages, have the best squads, and then want an even bigger advantage and don't even practice what they preach. That's bold. This should have been sorted out before. They should not still be arguing about this. I do agree with the competitive integrity stuff. That's when I've been involved in leagues and organizations, that's always been something I've kept front of mind. You want the competition to be as balanced, as fair as possible. You don't make major structural changes once you're inside the season. This is a little different in that you're dealing with, a real unknown in a pandemic and what it can do. Now, you did know the schedule would be what it was. You did have opportunities to get 5 subs voted in. You didn't. I do think it's a player safety issue.
Mm-hmm.
I think the amount of muscle injuries we're already seeing is a problem. I don't buy the argument about, if you gave 5 subs to these big clubs, then they're going to have such an advantage. They have an advantage if they rotate their squads anyway because they have better players than you. Like, that doesn't change. Does it give them more of an advantage to bring 2 more quality substitutes off the bench than you have? That's a valid argument. I don't think it trumps player safety. And that's my number one issue here, is that this is a player safety issue, and some clubs are making it about the competition side or their angle of the competition side and dismissing the player safety issue.
Right.
I agree with what they're saying in general, but I can't let those things trump player safety.
Yeah. And the other part of this that I'm looking at is you're looking at, for me, yes, player safety, number 1, put that at the top of the ladder and all of that. And the other element for me in this is the teams at the top of the table who are also dealing with European competitions at the same time that they're dealing with domestic competitions and having to rotate sides and all that other kind of stuff as that added dimension to all of this. But for me, first and foremost, it is player safety. And I'll go ahead and use the word, the hubris that the Premier League decided to just go ahead and peel back from 5 subs to 3 at the beginning of the season. I can't say that I'm surprised that I'm seeing these injuries to the levels that we're seeing them so far in the season. It's just, I know that I'm dealing with 2 separate lanes of traffic here, but the notion that you peel back your sub numbers from 5 to 3, and now you kind of put yourself in this corner competitively, it's troubling, but sadly not surprising. But for me, I would have always looked out for the side of the player and the safety of the player and the health of the player going into a season. And I think that you trimmed that by trimming the number of subs from 5 to 3.
Yeah. Player safety has to be first here. It has to be, and it's not. Burned on the Twitch pitch says the EPL does not act like a unified league. Everybody's fighting for themselves. It's short-sighted. I totally agree. Mm-hmm. Domer says allowing 5 subs is a much easier blanket policy than, say, forcing teams to limit the number of matches a player can play over a 4-week span. Totally agree with that, too. It's the better way to handle it. Managers still have to handle it, and they have to use the subs properly. They have to rotate properly. It's still not going to avoid all the muscle injuries. You're going to have some. It's just a fact. Tesco, sums it up for me. It's just I think they should just match what the rest of the world is doing.
Yeah.
It's putting your teams playing in international competition at a disadvantage. It will, I think. Maybe it isn't yet, but I think it will because of just the amount of wear and tear. It's just difficult. Some people who have come in just a little bit late are asking why your video has been replaced by a picture of Roger Goodell.
Oh, why? Whoa, you chose Roger Goodell today?
No, I chose you. It's a picture of you from Mercedes-Benz Stadium on the sidelines with GPB, but people thought it was Roger Goodell. Just saying. I said that was very harsh, Jason.
I don't have that sweater game, by the way.
What sweater game? Oh, he did the stupid sweater thing during the draft, didn't he?
He did.
That was. He was really trying to be funny,
cool, and trendy, and hey, look at me. Hey,
I'm Roger Goodell. I'm cool.
I'm keeping it light. Look at me. I'm in my basement. I'm wearing a sweater, and I've got a big monitor behind me. And the only thing missing out of that were the finger pistols.
I'm sure he did that off camera. He had to. He had to. Jason Nix says NBC saying they're reconsidering the sub option. They are. That's what brought this up, Jason. They're going to have a third vote on this. And Sheffield United has been one that has been very vocal, saying they are not going to support it. They're going to maintain their opposition to it. Chris Sutton, former player, pundit, was pretty strong on Twitter saying that he is against it. I just don't know why everybody else in the world has done this, and England is on an island, literally, deciding not to.
Because we're the best league in the world and we have the best athletes, therefore we should be able to go back to the way things were?
I'd like to see them say that out loud, because then the amount of laughing and falling over and probably stomach cramps from laughing so hard out of other countries would be very entertaining. Very, very entertaining.
Now Sheffield United is not having the 2020 season that they had in 2019.
Not really.
0-1-7. They've lost 4 of their last 5. They're at the bottom of the table. I would think, to help them get out of this relegation scrap, which has 5 teams separated by 5 points right now, that if they had 5 substitutes and healthier bodies, and in some way, you would think that might help the process where you're not grinding your back line into a fine mist with all of these games that you're having to play. I mean, I would think that would be part and parcel to help getting you out of the jam, other than maybe scoring more than 4 goals in your first 8 matches, but that's just me.
Yeah, the goals thing is kind of important. You're going to need that for sure. I don't know. We'll see what happens with Sheffield United. They might get to put themselves to the test of that championship schedule. That's not that difficult, according to Sheffield United, except most people have said it's difficult, just saying.
Talk to the guys across the hall in Sheffield and find out about that schedule.
Yeah, they would know. Cost their manager his job, although they did get some good news in the last couple of days, right?
Yeah, the 12-point penalty that was assessed for violating EFL rules was halved on appeal. So now the -12 is officially a -6 to start their season off, and so they are now out of the cellar.
Sheffield Wednesday is who
Sheffield
we're talking
Wednesday.
about, just in case you don't know.
Yeah, Sheffield Wednesday is out of the cellar in the championship on goal difference. So all of the fighting that they've done to get out of the -12 is now a -6, and they're now next to last in the championship.
What was on the list of rules that they broke?
I think it wasn't it selling the owner selling the stadium back to a separate company of the owner?
I can't remember. It very well could have been. I couldn't remember what it was. There's so many different clubs breaking so many different rules and getting deductions in England. I really can't keep up with which is which.
Yeah, but I think it was part of the common practice that we also saw with Derby County, where the owner sold the stadium property to a separate company that just so also happened to be owned by the owner of the club to kind of skirt financial fair play and profit and loss rules.
It's good times. Burned with a really good point, and I'll lead us into the next issue in England. In the Bundesliga, these votes, so about competition rules, anything like this, taken across the first and second division Bundesliga. That's 36 clubs, 18 in each. So there's not this small clubs versus big six mentality. Or if there is at some clubs, they get outvoted. There's a bigger feeling as well, and we talked about it with the Solidarity Fund that the top German clubs created. There's a feeling of that. There's a feeling of we are all in this together. Well, and this is something I need to go back and study. I mean, I remember when it happened. I also wasn't studying the business side of it at that time. I was in high school. But when the Premier League broke away from the Football League and you had that separation, one of the reasons was to get away from any kind of solidarity.
Yeah.
That was part of it. So that's stuck with it. And now you have the EFL, which is kind of split in some ways, although they're showing more solidarity. And you have the Premier League, which don't have the same business aims. And why is that a problem? Well, according to Rick Perry, the chairman of the EFL, 10 English Football League clubs are struggling to pay wages this month. That was said in a parliamentary committee now. Like they're talking about what they're going to do here. They're to that point. They're not still doing the things are looking bad, things are not looking good, we're going to have some problems, we could have a whole bunch of problems, blah, blah, blah. Now it's this month. You got 10 clubs who are going to struggle to pay their wages. The proposed £50 million rescue package from the Premier League was only for League One and League Two clubs. It did not include the championship. The EFL clubs voted it down because they didn't want to leave the championship out.
Right.
Rick Perry said he hopes a deal with the Premier League can be agreed by the end of the month. We would very much like to do a deal with the Premier League. We are having constructive dialogue. It was our League One and League Two clubs last month who, in a gesture of solidarity, said they did not want to abandon the championship. They wanted a deal for the league as a whole, which was commendable. The Premier League has now said it is prepared to consider the championship, so I think we can move forward on that basis. Okay, that's good. Richard Masters, the head of the Premier League, has said that a £250 million coronavirus bailout for EFL clubs would not be the best use of scarce Premier League funds. So, CEO of the Premier League, he is going to face MPs at a select committee hearing today. He'll be expected to explain why a financial support package for the lower leagues has yet to be agreed. EFL asking for £250 million. The total amount being offered, according to this report, was £80 million. And much of it available only as loans, especially to the clubs in the championship. So remember, this is the Department of Digital Culture, Media, and Sport, who have been very clear in saying they're not going to help anything to do with football. They expect the Premier League to help the other smaller clubs. So the Premier League has said, our estimated losses for last season were £700 million. And projected losses of $100 million this term as a reason for saying we can't just bail everybody out. All right, fair enough. He also says that the transfer spending by his 20 clubs as a whole, not everybody spent the same amount here, but the transfer spending in this past summer of £1 billion was a competitive necessity. So that's where the government is arguing. The government is saying, well, you guys spent $1 billion on transfers, so you should be able to give the EFL whatever they need. Does this logic make sense to you?
No.
I'll tell you why it doesn't make sense to me. Oh, hold on, I got to fight a bot here real quick. Man.
Fight that bot. Fight that bot.
Stupid bots.
Is it Russian?
It could have been. I'm not going to wait and find out. Okay. Trying to think of the right comparison here. So, I don't know all of the bailouts that the UK government has given. We heard about the theaters, museums, etc. Are they saying to, I don't know, the Rolling Stones?
Yeah.
Huge band, lots of money. They still make lots of money. Are they saying to the Rolling Stones, well, you guys make a lot of money. The struggling musicians who would be going on unemployment, you need to pay for them.
Yeah. I think that'd be a good.
You know, are they saying that like Gordon Ramsay and what he does as a restaurateur, not even the TV stuff, as a restaurateur,
right. Yeah,
you should be paying for the fish and chips spot down the street that can't be open right now.
Yeah, I think that would be a good analogy here, where the internationally known business, and I mean, at the end of the day, that's what, say, a Gordon Ramsay is, and that's what a Rolling Stones are. They are a business. That they should be the ones who are in a position. So you're in a position to take care of the struggling smaller businesses, so you ought to do it.
It's a kind of a weird stance. I mean, if the government doesn't have the money to bail out the smaller clubs, that's understandable. Mm-hmm. I mean, some of these clubs have been run poorly. Some of these clubs were on the brink of problems anyway. I understand that. Mm-hmm. Just say that. The whole thing, and the Premier League, in doing the right thing, should be helping. I want to make that clear. But the stance here of the government saying, we're going to help museums, we're going to help theaters, we're going to help X, Y, and Z, but we're not going to help football because the Premier League should do it. It's an odd stance to me. I do agree with the Premier League's argument of, well, you're helping these other community institutions. Why are you not helping the community football clubs? And maybe there should be a line there somewhere. Maybe it's the League One and League Two clubs. Maybe it's just the non-league clubs. I don't know. I don't know where the line is. That can be argued. But going back to what Burns said at the beginning about the solidarity that you see in Germany, MLS is built on solidarity. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to see the Colorado Rapids, not make payroll when Atlanta and New York City are. You're going to see a collective group working together for the good of the league.
Right.
English football does not have that at all as a whole. The Premier League, even with their 20, doesn't even have that. And this is what will happen. You're going to have to get some catastrophe before anything happens. And that catastrophe could be coming with wages not being paid in the next month.
Right.
That's where I think the Premier League steps up and says, okay, this is what we have to do. Now, what kind of package they put together, and this is where it's kind of like, well, you need to be bailed out. How much leverage do you really have to argue the terms of the package that somebody else is going to give to you? I don't know. I don't know, but nobody's really thinking big picture here, from the FA to the Premier League to the EFL to the government, and people are going to get hurt.
Yeah. I mean, we can look at those three tables in the Championship, League One and League Two, and we could pretty much take a really good guess as to who those clubs are that would be the ones who are struggling to make payroll. We've covered stories involving teams like Wigan Athletic and teams. I mean, really all you should do is, as a baseline without having any kind of financial knowledge, just go to the bottom of those tables. Mm-hmm. And those would be a good guess as to who the individual clubs are that would be having these financial problems. And these are clubs that have been around and a part of the English football pyramid forever in some cases. And when you think about what happens if these clubs, who are parts of the fabric of their communities, their regions, their own element of the English football pyramid, their pieces of history, if these pieces start to fall away, then it's not just a club that disappears. We talked about it with Bury when they went away last year. But you've got a Bury, you've got a Wigan. You can look at Shrewsbury and Morecambe and all these other teams that are really hurting. You're not just hurting a club, you're hurting a community, you're hurting associated businesses, you're hurting everyone who's there getting some kind of a job. All of the trickle down that is there when it comes to all of these different elements of all of these teams that are in all of this trouble, when you start to see, sadly, and I think you're dead on here, when you start to see these clubs sitting there and waving the white flag from the top of their stand and going, look, we can't do this anymore. Sadly, it might be too late. And what you're seeing is reactive ideas instead of proactive ideas. It's like, well, no, and then it's going to be too late to save a lot of these clubs that are a part of this fabric. And it's more than just a club that plays 90 minutes on a pitch once or twice a week during the season.
Yeah, I think we've got some comments on Twitter. While you pull those up, I think you've got to get to a point here where you're thinking outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take some different ways of thinking to solve this, as I think we're all finding out with just life in general at the moment. These clubs are community institutions, and if you want to tie whatever rescue package you have to doing work in the community, fine, do it. If you want to tie it into having to meet certain financial regulations in terms of running a balanced set of books, okay, fine, do it. Use this as an opportunity to strengthen, not just bail out.
Right.
You can't solve what some of these clubs have done in general, like Sheffield Wednesday, for example. I mean, I think you were focusing on the smaller clubs. I'll look at the championship clubs. Some of them that have been run very, very poorly and have just operated basically spending every bit they have on lottery tickets to get back into the Premier League, not operating for the long term. It's not the Premier League. It's not the Big Six. It's not the Big 10, 12, whatever clubs that are fairly safe year to year. It's not their responsibility to fix those mistakes. I understand that argument from them. I get it. They shouldn't have to have that responsibility. But for the good of the game as a whole, they need to take on that responsibility. But if that means putting proper terms on it, then do it. Just like Marcus Rashford has stepped up and done something outside the box that nobody thought he could do, nobody thought he could pull off, to the point that after their match this weekend, Boris Johnson calls him to say, we are going to fund these initiatives that you have pushed us to fund.
Yep.
He got it done. Somebody needs to be that person in England. Stop arguing about 3 subs and it's not going to help us, but it's going to help them, but we're going to be hurt and blah. Somebody has to step up. And there are people with huge platforms in England who understand the big picture. Somebody has to step up and explain, no, it is not the Premier League's responsibility to bail out clubs who have been run poorly. Yes, it is needed for the good of the game. Let's not use this just as, here's a handout.
Yeah.
Keep paying your wages this month. Use it as a, hey, this is an opportunity to fix your business. You're going to take it on these terms to fix your business.
Yeah.
And that's it. And part of that is going to be community work. Part of that's going to be balancing your books. Part of that's going to be running responsibly. But we have to stop thinking with the same old nonsense at this point. Somebody has to lead the way. And I don't know who that is because nobody's stepping up to do it. It's got to be somebody with influence in the game. And they got to do it now because you're running out of time. You don't want a club to have to fold for that wake-up call to hit.
Right, yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. No, I mean, Reading, we had seen, had basically spent $2 for every $1 that they brought in. Right now they're at the top of the table in the championship. You look at Blackburn and the folks that own Vinky's Chicken. They've had problems. You worry about a team like Huddersfield with parachute payments running out from the Premier League. You look at Birmingham City, who's had problems. QPR with the Fernandez family, with all of the other businesses that he's been a part of that aren't doing so well right now. Nottingham Forest is in trouble. John Nason can talk about Coventry City till he's blue in the face. Sheffield Wednesday, we talked about them this morning. Derby County basically did the same thing in shifting ownership of the stadium from one section of the owner's business to another. Hopefully this new investment will help Derby County out in that regard. So, yeah, your point to the championship is taken as well, where it's not just the bottom of the table that's being affected.
Do you have Twitter pulled up?
I do.
Okay, I know Daniel had chimed in on this, and anybody else, let's hit that now.
Yeah, Daniel says, I think it's in the Premier League's best interest to hold the lower leagues up, but also considering soccer is a huge part of English culture, the government are vested as well. I think both sides should be helping. It's stupid that it's come to this.
Yeah, it's a necessity. Because if you lose some of these smaller neighborhood community clubs, you're hurting culture in the UK. And yeah, you got to think about the You got to think about Northern Ireland. You got to think about Wales. You got to think about Scotland. You've got to think across the board. The UK government, if you're getting into any kind of bailout scheme, you've got to think about those leagues as well. You've got to think across the board. That's accurate. It is something where people need to take on responsibility that's maybe outside of their purview right now. So we will see where it goes. Anything else on Twitter before we jump around?
Not based on our current conversation. We have a couple of other things that are not Premier League English football related.
Okay. I want to get into a couple of things. Hold on. Katie Weaver said, Sunderland's still riding that Sunderland Till I Die money. I want a new season that follows the club this year. Wonder how much money that was. I don't know if it was enough. Not sure if it was enough to really make a substantial difference. Conversation on the Twitch pitch that I'm going to bring to the floor now. Sam Williamson said, good morning for everyone that watched the press conference yesterday from Darren Eales, Carlos Bocanegra. How do you feel confident going into next season? And Kefzi and Sam Williamson have been going back and forth. Sam said he thought that that Darren and Carlos sounded unsure and not enthusiastic. I didn't really get that sense, Sam. Sam said it sounds like they want to do a full reset, and I didn't get that sense either, especially on the roster. I think they were saying the opposite, to be perfectly honest. It's not going to be a full reset. That would be destructive, and I don't think that's necessary. My takeaways from it, and maybe the first part of it, and this is something Kefsi, I think, was starting to hit on. It's been a hard season. And I think maybe it's easy for those of us, and I'm including myself because I'm not doing everything that they've had to do this season. It's been hard for me, but I'm not doing all that. It's been hard on this coaching staff, 2 of them. It's been hard on the front office. It's been hard on the players to function any resemblance of normally this season. It's been a lot of wear and tear. I mean, beyond the results, just the idea of what you've had to do this season. It's been hard, and they've taken more criticism than they've ever taken. And yes, I think some of the criticism has been unfair. And has that worn them down? Absolutely it has.
Yeah.
I think some of the lines of questioning yesterday were unfair at times, and I thought you got a sense of some of the frustration. That's real. I mean, we're talking human beings here, you know? Like, this is part of it. Like, some of the things that came up have come up over and over again, and they've answered it fully, and it keeps coming up. I mean, it's just like, what are you supposed to do at some point? You keep saying the same things, and do you get frustrated saying the same things? Yeah, you do. It happens. But in terms of the full reset, no, I don't. I think maybe there's a little bit of a mix of topics in that regard, because I didn't get a sense that they're looking at a reset of the roster. I got a sense that maybe there is a reset of mentality and vibe, which you would do after a poor season anyway. Like, that has nothing to do with anything unique to this. It's just you're trying to change the vibe. You want to get back to the excitement. You want to get back to people in the building to help bring that excitement. But you want to get back to where you were. If that's a reset, then okay, that can work. I don't think it's a roster reset, because I don't think it's needed. To be perfectly honest, I don't think a roster reset is needed. I don't think it would accomplish anything. I'm going to pull up something real quick, because I was kind of thinking about what the roster could look like going forward, and I'm sure we'll get more into detail on this. Just a couple other things before we jump into roster specifically. They're going to be talking to players and making decisions on options, people who the club has to declare an option on, which is the option would trigger another year on their contract. That decision has to be made by the end of the month. Carlos said that they're going to speak to players, and I'm sure agents are part of that conversation, over the next 7 to 10 days. Just the way that works in general, like, you have an option clause in a contract, and almost always it's held by the club. occasionally, not so much in MLS, but occasionally in some leagues, you'll see where it is a player option. The NBA started going down that road a lot, where players can opt out. This is one in MLS where it's the club making the decision to opt into another year. So you can take the terms that are on paper in the contract, or you can try to renegotiate. Think back to Justin Merrim last year. The conversation all the way around that was he had an option number. They declined the option, but they kept negotiating, trying to get to a new contract. They ultimately did not. So when you're having these conversations over the next 7 to 10 days, that's what it will be. Some of them where the option number is, a number that the club doesn't want to pay, but they'd like to keep the player. Can they negotiate a new deal? Keep that in mind. Those things don't have to be announced until the end of the month. Cincinnati jumped out in front of it. I don't know if they felt like they wanted to do that to make a statement. I don't know the details on Cincinnati's line of thinking. They didn't have to. So that's one major thing here. They want to have a coach in place by the end of the year. Carlos reiterated that. He wasn't going to give any details on the search. Question that we talked about a little bit yesterday, just in terms of what characteristics you're looking for. Carlos kind of reiterated the same things he said. Like, you have an idea of the type of player you're looking for. You have an idea of the type of coach you're looking for. It goes back to that identity that the club has and wants to reinforce of attacking, of speed, of fast and fluid, of controlling games, those kinds of things. That's what you're looking for in a coach, just like it's what you're looking for with players. So all that's the same. Okay, the roster, and in terms of if a reset is needed, I know I have this somewhere if I can find it in my files. I don't think it's as far off maybe as others do, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. We'll run through it really fast. We'll get into detail, I'm sure, in the offseason. It'll probably make a whole lot more sense to get into more detail once we know those option decisions, once those are public. So we're not going to deep dive into it right now. And if you guys want to continue to chat about this, go for it. It's all good. So goalkeeper, we kind of know what the status of things are. Brad Gazan's under a long-term deal. You have Alec Can right now. You have the players that we've talked about before. Brendan Moore, Ben Lundgaard, who's on an Atlanta United 2 deal, Vicente Reyes, who's in your academy, Justin Garces, who is at UCLA but could be signed to a homegrown deal, and Novo, who is reportedly coming on loan from Lanús next season. Don't see any major changes there. Could some of the pieces below Brad Gazan change? Sure, because of contracts and because of figures and salary caps and such. Left back, right now, you have Bello, you have Castillo, you have Anton Walks who can play over there, you have Caleb Wiley coming through your academy. Center back, you have Miles Robinson, you have Franco Escobar, you have Fernando Meza. You have Anton Walks, you have George Campbell, you have Lawrence Wyke. You have Efrain Morales, who will be on a homegrown deal starting next season, who played with Atlanta United 2 this year. You have guys in the academy and on Atlanta United 2 deals as well. And we don't know the status of Atlanta United 2 deals either. Those are decisions that are being made at the same time, I would assume. Could some of those players stick around? Could some of those players get an opportunity to show that they're worthy of a first-team deal? That's something that Carlos and Darren talked about with this CONCACAF match. You're going to see some USL and some academy players. If they don't play in the match, they're going to be able to train with the team as they prepare for the match. So you're going to get a look at them against first-team competition. That will help make some decisions. Right back. You got Brooks Lennon. You've got Escobar, who we know can play right back. You've got Anton Walks. Wyke has played right back as well. Jack Gurr is a player who had a great season with Atlanta United too. Does he get an opportunity to be one of those that shows maybe he can play with first-team players? We'll find out. At the 6, right now, you have Adams, you have Lorenowitz, you have Remedi. Wyke can play the 6 a little bit. You have Will Riley in your academy, who's played a lot of games for Atlanta United 2. You had Abdoulaye Diop this season with Atlanta United 2. At the 8 role, you have Moreno, you have Hindman, you have Hosetu, you have Remedi, you have Riley, who can play the 8. You had academy player, probably a little bit longer down the road in Johnny Fortune. You had Babacar Njai, who was on an Atlanta United 2 deal. You had Daniel Steedman, who was on an Atlanta United 2 deal. The 10 role, and we'll blend it all together because 8-10, you can play 2 8s, you can play 2 10s, you can play an 8, you can play a 10, whatever. Barco can play centrally, we know that. Andrew Carlton is under contract right now. You know, he can play in that role. Amir Bashti can play in that role. He played it a good bit for Atlanta United 2 over the last year and a half. David Mejia in the academy turned some heads this year with Atlanta United 2. Out on the wings, we'll start on the left. You got Barco, you got Gallagher, you got Carlton, you got Mulroney, you got Kunga, you got Philip Goodrum, who was with Atlanta United 2. Right wing, you got Jurgen Damm. Brooks Lennon can play on the right wing. Mulroney can play on either side. You had Manuel Castro on loan this year. I don't expect that will get picked up. You never know. Tyler Wolff can play on the wing. Kunga can play on either side. Goodrum can play on either side. Up top, you've got Joseph. You've got Torres, at least for now. We don't know the length of his contract. You've got Adam John. Gallagher can play up top. Wolff can play up top. You've got Jackson Conway with Atlanta United 2, who could sign a homegrown deal. You've got Mackie Jope, who scored a lot of goals for Atlanta United 2 this season. You've got some options there. J.J. Williams is still under contract as well. Don't know the length of that one. That's kind of the mix of players that you have right now that would be on a depth chart. I don't think it's really much you can do with putting them in order at the moment because some of those players won't be back. Some of those players won't be on a roster for next year because some of them will be out of contract. Some of them, the terms of bringing them back on a contract would be too high for the role they would be in. Some of them will want to go elsewhere for more opportunities. That happens too. Some of them will get transferred because a good deal will come. Some of them won't because a good deal won't come. Like that's the nature of it. But to me, if you go into it tomorrow and just assuming everybody's contract works out, you get to keep everybody you want, you could see a lineup next season of Brad Kazan, George Bello, Miles Robinson, Franco Escobar, Brooks Lennon. Let's say Mo Adams for right now because I think he was your best number 6 down the stretch. Mm-hmm. Moreno and either Hindman or Hosetu. And then you're looking at Barco, Dom, and Joseph Martinez. I don't think that needs a hard reset.
No.
That's my opinion. Maybe it does. The 6 is the question I have out of that group right now.
I'm right there with you.
You know?
Nathan Pugh, along those same lines, asked early this morning as he was heading into work, at this point, what managerial irons are in Darren's fire and how many frogs can fit on his skillet?
Yeah, we're going to have to figure out this frog in a skillet thing that you said last night. That was bonkers and almost broke me. I did learn that you're not the only one who has taken the frog in a boiling pot of water analogy and turned it into a frying pan. You use skillet, so you went further down the road. I think that was the Valdosta influence.
Probably.
But I have read the frog in a frying pan reference. It's the same analogy, basically. I like frog in a skillet, though. That sounds appropriate for this kind of show.
Teespring, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. The managerial side, I don't know what the list is. I mean, there's really no way to know that because nobody's reported on it. Nothing's leaked out. So who could it be? I mean, I think we're having the same conversation we've had about this. The last 2 hires were managers who had a high profile. You know, they had differing levels of experience and success. Tata Martino had more experience. Actually, I think Frank de Boer might have had more league titles, or they were equal. Remember, Frank won 4 straight at Ajax in his first 4 seasons. So you had 2 managers who had a profile. You had 2 managers who were coming off of recent disappointments. In Tata's case, people looked at his Barcelona year as a disappointment. I think that's harsh. They looked at his time with Argentina as a disappointment. I think that's harsh. He got to 2 Copa America finals. They lost on penalties in both. But that was the perception coming in. There were people who thought it wouldn't work. There were lots of people who questioned that hire. It was not a slam dunk hire. Do not get it twisted. There were a lot of people, and there were a lot of people all the way up until the start of the postseason in 2018 who questioned if that was the right move or not. That was real. Frank, people question it from day one, and there are people who are still arguing that 2019 was a failure, which I think is incorrect.
Agreed.
But that's what's out there. So you look at the last two hires, and you're trying to create this profile, is it somebody with a profile who you would know more than likely and is trying to bounce back after a recent job, or somebody who's just looking for a different opportunity who has a profile? That's what the last two hires have been. Is that the direction you go here? I mean, it's two hires. It's possible, but it's also possible you hire somebody that you think, and I think this is the more important side of it, fits that profile of what you're looking for from a playing profile. And we got into it back and forth on Soccer Over There last night from a big picture conversation about tactics and formation and playing personality and all those things. You're thinking even bigger than that with a profile here. You want somebody who is going to produce a team that is fast and fluid, that controls matches, that wins, because that is a factor in this. It's not the only factor, but it is a factor. You don't just want to be a team that plays a wild offense that does score a lot of goals but concedes 60. That's not going to be okay. No. Because you're not going to win that way. There is a balance that has to be struck, and I think sometimes that gets thrown in the trash. It can't be. You have to have balance. But are you going to look for a manager who fits that profile who maybe doesn't have as big of a name? We haven't seen it in the first two hires, but again, it's only two. So I wish I could tell you more. I don't know anything else. I'm fascinated by what they do here because it is a huge hire.
Yes.
No question about it. It's a huge hire. It's just like when Barcelona's job was open, it was a big hire. Just like when big clubs in other countries have a job opening, it's a big hire. This is a big hire. This is a big hire in this hemisphere. We've seen in the last 24 hours, the two of the top three clubs in Brazil make changes. One was a firing, Dome Tarrant, who had lost, I believe it was 6 games in 26. He had lost 2 in his last 13. Now, they were the last 2 he played, and he got blown out. Mm-hmm. His teams scored a lot of goals. Created a lot of chances. They conceded more than they should have, and it's not just in the blowouts. They had some blowouts, which were surprising. Also sounds like there were some problems behind the scenes. There's some reports coming out of Globo Esporte, which is typical whenever there's a firing. You always get the tabloid. The tabloid comes out, and they're going to talk about what happened. Sounds like there was frustration on the player side at Flamengo because when Dome Tarrant was talking to them about playing better and performing better, he said he watched the 2019 campaign, and he said that you can't count on winning the Copa Libertadores again with luck. This is all translated in a second hand. People took exception to that. Okay. I mean, I didn't study Flamengo's full Libertadores campaign in 2019. River Plate should have won the final. River Plate should have won that match, and they didn't. Was it luck? I don't know, but that's kind of soft in my opinion if that's going to get you upset. I don't know. And maybe he just wasn't the right fit personality-wise for that team. But he only lost 6 in 26. You know, he's in third place in the league. He got out of the group stage in the Copa Libertadores. He's into the quarterfinals of the Copa do Brasil. You know, he got fired for that. Now, Eduardo Caldet at Internacional, who's leading the league, he left because the Celta Vigo job opened up in Spain. He walked. And now they have went back to somebody who is in his 6th stint at Internacional, Abel Braga, who has bounced all over the place, and mostly in Brazil, but he has spent some time in other countries as well. They've hired him. Flamengo went and hired Rogério Ceni, who is a legendary goalkeeper for Sao Paulo. Not really a ton of experience as a manager, and not a lot of it great, mostly at Fortaleza. When he's been at a little bit bigger club, it hasn't gone as well for him. He was at Cruzeiro, and he was at Sao Paulo, and they were very short stints. I think Sao Paulo, he got to like 13 games. Over 120 games as a manager, it's not a ton. So those two moves happened very quickly, but because they happened quickly, Ceni and Braga are not exactly hires that get you too excited.
No.
So this move in Atlanta not happening quickly, there's more pressure on it the longer it goes. I think that is a valid part of the conversation. So we'll see where all of this goes, but it's not, none of this is easy. It wasn't easy all year, and I think some of the frustration is reflected by that. It's a hard year. It was a difficult year. Just the amount of challenges just to do basic things, just to train. You know, players had to give up whatever personal life they had to try to not bring coronavirus into the training pitch. And for the most part, they did a really good job of that. You only had a couple of positives, and we don't know if those were fluky ones. They didn't have outbreaks, so they were handling all their protocols correctly. But, you know, players sacrificed a lot. Coaches sacrificed a lot. Staff sacrificed a lot. I mean, from digital staff who had to do the same testing that the team did to be able to do their jobs, and they still had limitations in doing their jobs. That's why you weren't able to do a lot of the things that you normally would. And Darren talked about that yesterday. I think I've said it before, I think the criticism of the digital team and the comms team is incredibly unfair in a year like 2020. I think it's really, really disappointing to see because they were not able to do their normal jobs. And a lot of them had to make the sacrifices that the players did. And they're not on player kind of salaries. I mean, let's just be real about that. You had a comms person have to go and live in the bubble and do all of that. You had digital people had to go in the bubble, do the bubble life. That's just the bubble part of it, let alone when they get back here and they're tier 1. They have the same level of responsibility that the players do in not getting other people sick. And we're going to start griping about not having player interviews at different points. I mean, got to understand how hard this was for everybody. Mm-hmm. And does that excuse some of the results? It does not. But is it part of the story of 2020? It 100% is. And I think that has been forgotten at times. So that's a lot of the stuff I took away from yesterday. And it's also my perspective and my experiences feed into that as well, and I totally understand that. But I'm telling you how I felt about some of it. And if you disagree, completely cool. Bring it up in the Twitch pitch, tweet about it, whatever you want to do, that's completely fine. We'll talk about it. But those were my takeaways. I went a little bit longer than I expected, but that's where it was. And that was a peek at my very early depth chart that will change by the end of the month. And I think we'll learn a lot from that CONCACAF game. I really do. I think it is a useful experience because you're going to get some guys a look that they would not have gotten otherwise. You know, in a normal year, your Atlanta United 2 season would end. Your first team season would end. That's it. This could be an opportunity that was unexpected for a Jack Gurr, for example, who gets an opportunity to train ahead of a game. And he could be signed to a short-term deal ahead of that. I believe he's under an Atlanta United 2 contract. That's something they have to figure out as well. You talk about how hard this year is. I mean, Carlos, I think, displayed some of his frustration in terms of they don't really know what this game's going to be like.
Yep.
Because they've got to make decisions on options before you even bring the guys back for training. I mean, there could be a scenario where you're going to decline an option on somebody. You're probably going to talk about renewing a contract, but then you're going to be asking them to come back into 2 weeks of training ahead of this game, and they might say no. Or they might say yes, but they're not under contract.
Yeah.
So then what do you do, or what can you do? I mean, it's so hard. I also got the impression that the players had to be released for a couple of weeks right now. They couldn't train all the way through. That was not going to be allowed under the terms of the CBA, which this doesn't apply to some of that because this wasn't ever part of the CBA because you didn't expect to have a CONCACAF match in middle of December after the season ends. So you could be in a really weird spot with this game, and they're having to figure it out on the fly and try to make the best of it. When those situations happen, it can create opportunity. And that's what's going to be interesting here. Who grabs it? Who takes it? Who is the player who gets an invite because of numbers, who gets an invite because they're willing to come and work for a few weeks? Who is the person who makes the most of this opportunity? Somebody will.
Yep.
There will be a player who will change their trajectory because of that CONCACAF game, and I can't wait to see who it'll be. That's going to be an interesting story.
Daniel is already lobbying to announce Pochettino as the new head coach.
Stop it, people. Stop it. That's not happening, okay? The reports are already out there that he is waiting on the Manchester United job. I think the Inter job will open up, and it's a better job for him. That's the world he's living in. It would make no sense for him in his career to come to Major League Soccer. I understand the want, but do not, because I've seen this happen at times with some of the people in this community, is if it's not somebody like a Mauricio Pochettino, which it probably won't be because he is highly regarded as one of the best managers in the world, then you're setting up a disappointment. And that's not fair because Pochettino was never a realistic candidate. Can anything happen? Sure, anything can happen. It's 2020. We didn't think we'd be playing a CONCACAF game in mid-December either, but it's happening. It shouldn't happen because he should have a bigger club come calling, and I think he'll be patient. So it's not realistic. And that's the thing when you start talking about players or managers, that somehow it can create these moments of disappointment when it's not somebody like that, when that wasn't realistic to begin with, and now you've changed the whole storyline, which isn't fair to anybody involved in it. So we'll see. It's not going to be Pochettino, though.
You want me to thank somebody before we get into some USL breaking news?
Yes, and I don't think it's breaking. I think it's broken, if
developed.
It's the one I'm thinking
It
of.
developed.
Okay, well, let's thank somebody first.
Appolinsky & Associates, LLC, proud supporters of everything soccer down here in the SDH network. For wrongful death and serious injury matters, one phone call that you need to take, one phone call that you need to make. It is to Appolinsky & Associates. Couple different ways that you can get a consultation for a wrongful death or serious injury matter if this is a road, unfortunately, that you need to go down. You can write Steve an email and hit him up directly at steve@aa-legal.com. You can call Appolinsky & Associates, LLC at 404-377-9191. Get a free consultation that way. Or you can go onto the World Wide Web. Type in aa-legal.com. Large device or small, hit the enter key, the return key, the arrow key, whichever advances the screen forward to the homepage of Appolinsky & Associates, LLC. And the pop-up window pops up because that's what pop-up windows do. They pop up. Strange how that happens. 24/7, 365 and a quarter. Someone, we do not know who, but someone is the great and powerful Oz at the other end of that pop-up window, and we don't know who it is. Steve Appolinsky could be him, but you can get questions answered 24/7, 365 and a quarter if you have questions that need to be answered. aa-legal.com. Appolinsky & Associates, over 30 years of experience, over $40 million in judgments in wrongful death and serious injury matters for their clients in Georgia and Alabama, recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend Magazine for being one of the top 100 firms in this here state of Georgia. The website for Appolinsky & Associates, LLC is aa-legal.com.
Not bad. You ran a little long, though.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, like I said, threw in some more information that I'm not used to throwing in there. So, and a couple of other elements of creative license this morning. So I went ahead and did it that way.
Very nice. Developing USL news from John Nelson.
The Charleston Battery announced the formation of a strategic partnership with Scottish top division club Hibernian FC of Edinburgh. Partnership will provide collaboration between both clubs on matters including player development, scouting, operational efficiency, and community engagement. And from the release from the club, the two historic organizations envision an evolving relationship founded on shared values, philosophies employed on and off the pitch. Ronald J. Gordon, major shareholder and executive chairman at Hibbs, says, quote, "We're delighted and excited by the partnership. It brings together two clubs with shared values on and off the pitch in a way that'll help us both achieve our aspirations. Looking at ways we can work together, be smarter, expand our networks, learn from each other is only going to be a good thing. The player development component of the partnership will provide Battery players the opportunity to train in Edinburgh. Leland Archer and Robbie Crawford kick off the player exchange as they have already traveled there. They'll begin training with Hibernian FC mid-November, gain valuable experience with the club." Quoting Brandon Lieb, Battery co-owner, "I've been looking at opportunities across Europe, including the Scottish Premiership, and believe that Hibernian FC is an ideal partner. Our two clubs share many of the same values and beliefs. It's an opportunity for us to collaborate and evolve our clubs through an innovative transatlantic partnership, and we will be catching up with Mike Kelleher Thursday about this, and we will have that released on the network over the weekend."
The thing that jumps out to me about this that's really interesting from a Hibbs perspective is Charleston has historically done a really good job of scouting and developing networks in the Caribbean. And I'm sure that's something that Hibbs doesn't have. So, I mean, whether you're talking about, man, I mean, who all has come from Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica through Charleston? Quite a few players that could potentially come to Charleston and then make a jump to Hibbs. So, really interesting partnership. Charleston will get a bigger club that they're partnering with, and they'll get the benefits of that, and they'll have somewhere for their players to potentially move up to. But I think Hibbs getting the access to the network that the Battery have developed over a long period of time in the Caribbean could be really, really fascinating.
And this was something that I did not know. Hibernian's principal contact for the partnership actually lives in Charleston.
Yeah, he's a scout.
So I thought that's very cool. And technical side, teams are sharing best practices pertaining to training methodology, scouting, and sports science. Hibbs players will have the opportunity to train in Charleston with the Battery as well. So no, this is very, very cool. I knew that something like this was coming, didn't know the exact team that was going to be tied to. But, yeah, this is very cool between Hibernian and the Battery.
All right, getting caught up on the Twitch pitch. Shiva talking about the media availability yesterday. I think they said they have set themselves up for success, and the way I read it is letting FDB go when they did and also selling Pitti when they did. They talked about those, and it's the same things that have been talked about. Again, it's nothing new, and I think any hint of low energy was because they've answered a lot of these same questions. FDB, it was the direction of travel, which is the phrase that Darren Eales has used. He didn't feel like they were going in the direction to have the success that they wanted to have. So they parted ways. Pitti, Darren talked about it. It was a great deal, and it 100% was. Like, anybody questioning that move, and I don't think there's a whole lot of it, outside of people saying that, how did Pitti get this kind of a deal? He's not that good. Well, Al Nasser thought he was, and he's done well over there. And he got a huge raise personally. He got probably a percentage of the transfer, depending on whatever the terms of the contract were. And the club made money on the deal, which is hard to do in 2020 and in COVID times. Mm-hmm. So that was a win for everybody, and it was a deal they really couldn't say no to at the time. So those were two moves that made sense for them to do. They went out and then got Marcelino Moreno, lower price than what they paid for Pitti, different player. He's going to give them different things than Pitti did. He's not a direct replacement because he's not the same player, which Pitti wasn't a direct replacement for Miguel Almiron because he wasn't the same player. That's how this works. But you made money on that deal. So anyway, I think those were two moves that have been talked about, really nothing new said. It was the same things that have been reiterated over and over again. Vote 2 for thinking your picture was Roger Goodell, which is good times. Harmless bunny. That's funny. Wow, Jason Nix, Kefsey, Harmless bunny, all in on it. The suit in the stadium really sells the likeness.
Wow.
Good stuff. Kefsey says, we should see something about who might go sooner than later. All the people calling out names in the chat are just playing fantasy manager. You probably will. Again, go back to what was said yesterday. Carlos said over the next 7 to 10 days is when they're having those conversations about the option decisions, because that's part of it. There could be other moves that happen in the transfer window in January, but the option decisions will be the first thing that comes up. When those decisions are made, maybe they don't announce it until the end of the month, because you could decline the option and try to renegotiate. You could decline the option and say, thanks for your time, we're going to move on. You could pick up the option and welcome back. So there's lots of different ways that could go, but once those decisions get made and agents are notified, yes, agents talk. That's normally how stuff comes out around here. So that could start to come out over time. I don't know who's up for an option. That's the thing, is I don't even know who falls into that category, because we don't really know. So I don't even know who to consider. I mean, I think you look at guys who have been here for a little bit of time, but also there are players who sign one-year deals with an option. I don't think any of the players that we talked about as potential starters for next year are in that conversation. Usually it's players who are trying to work their way into the team, who are on a 1-year or a 2-year, and then an option comes up. Other players are signed to longer-term deals with options at the end. But I don't know who's in what category. There's just, it hasn't been reported, so we don't know. Shiva says, anyone here to give Franco some love? Stu Holden was not. Stu Holden posted a lot of laughing emojis in quote tweeting Franco's statement, which I was a little disappointed to see, to be perfectly honest. Franco, for one, made the statement in English. English is not his first language. I don't believe he has given media in English ever.
I can't think of one.
I don't think so. For him to try to make that statement in English, one, I absolutely applaud him for it. Two, when you take it in English and you put it in the words of, or in the mouth of it, or the brain of an American player, of an English player, it has a different meaning than if that's coming from an Argentine player or a Latin player, but Franco is specifically from Argentina. So we will talk about it in those terms. Professional pride is a massive, massive component there. Fighting for the badge, fighting for the shirt is a massive, massive component there. Franco did not hide from the fact that he did something that was wrong, and he did not hide from the feelings of somebody trash-talking him after he had been sent off, and I think the send-off was a joke. Doesn't matter. He didn't hide from how that made him feel. Didn't say it was right. He explained why he did it. Mm-hmm. I think it's very strange to laugh at somebody who is explaining that in a language that is not their own. And to do that, I'm really disappointed in that, to be perfectly honest. You should read more Argentine media to have a better understanding of how players speak. You put that in Spanish and you put that in an article in Olé or in Clarín or previously in El Gráfico, you're going to find that kind of quote very often. So I'm kind of blown away by that reaction. Again, if you are putting that in the mouth of a young American player, yeah, there's a lot of people who would say, oh, well, that's just stupid. You can't feel that way. If you put that in the brain of an Argentine player, that is how they feel. Because professional pride, representing the badge, fighting for the badge, fighting for the shirt, continuing to advance in a tournament, in a competition, is everything. And yes, you're going to be upset when somebody trash talks you. And yes, you're going to defend your honor. And you're going to defend the club's honor and the badge's honor. It is a different mentality. So to laugh at that is very short-sighted, in my opinion. That's how I feel about it.
I'm just going to I'll put it this way. For me, it's lacking in class and understanding of where Franco is coming from. So when I saw that this morning, to add that to his comments a couple weeks ago where Stu Holden said that in looking at Atlanta United, he thought that they had thrown in the towel at the end of the Major League Soccer season.
Well, he said that. You got to say when he said that. I wasn't listening to the broadcast, so you're going to have to answer that. But my understanding was he said that when it was 3-0 in Orlando. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, because I did not hear the comment. I was calling the game myself, so I didn't hear the broadcast.
You were calling the game. He said it, and he said that he had been looking at Atlanta United over the last couple of matches, and it was his thought that Atlanta United had thrown in the towel on the season. And I thought that was wholly incorrect.
I disagree with that completely.
And so right now, Stu Holden for me is 2 for 2 in being wholly incorrect in the last handful of weeks for me.
I'm just disappointed that he would take a player's statement and not try to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's, again, because I'm sure there's lots of people who had the same reaction as Stuart Holden here, and lots of people who are going to respond affirmatively to the tweet with the laughing emojis. So, there are people who feel that way. I'm trying to give you a little more context.
Yeah.
I think Franco gives you everything he can possibly give you as a supporter of this club. I think he gives everything that he can possibly give to the club. Does he run hot sometimes? He does. He absolutely does. Is that part of what makes him a good defender in this league? It is. Can he find a balance? I hope so, because it'll keep him in more games. He won't have as many yellow cards. It'll keep him from being noticed so much by referees. I think if he got a second yellow on it, that's what sent him off. But I think the fact that he had some conversations with Ismail Elfath probably accentuated that. And Elfath was just tired of hearing him. And he got an opportunity to give him a second yellow. I think it's an extremely soft second yellow, but he sends him off. Franco needs to learn to manage those situations a little bit better. That's just managing yourself on the field. That's a whole different conversation. You can learn to do that. You can't learn to play with the fire that he has. So I back Franco 100% here. I don't know what was said by the person on the bench. Wasn't there. Haven't heard anybody come out and say it. Don't know how that went down. But I back Franco, and he's going to take a suspension for it. And it could be a fairly decent one because it happened after a match. It happened after he'd been suspended. After he was out of the match. It happened after he had been sent off. It's not going to be great for him because he's going to get punished for it. But I back him because I think his heart is in the right place in what he feels for this club and what he feels for the badge. And by extension, what he feels for the supporters. So, anyway, we'll see where that goes. There will be some kind of announcement from the disciplinary committee, and I'm sure they will find different reasons to make sure it is a substantial punishment. It should be, because that can't happen. That's not supposed to happen. It doesn't need to happen. It doesn't. The reason, I understand the reason, doesn't justify it. He's going to get punished. He's probably going to be fined. He's probably going to miss multiple games. Okay. You take it, you move on. J-Dub on the Twitch pitch says, based on what Bocanegra said, it seems as though we aren't going to make the remaining CCL match a priority, and however the roster shapes up by then is how it is. Is that a fair assessment? Yeah, I think the one thing I would say that I don't think you're not saying, J-Dub, is I don't think they really can make it a priority. Like, the players had to be able to be released after this last game. They can't bring them back, I think, until the end of the month. So you're going to get 2 weeks of training. You're going to have to – they don't even know yet what they can do with the players who they have to decline options on. Like, they have to do the option decisions before they even bring people back. Their hands are tied and I think in how much of a priority they can make that match. So, I mean, in just the nature of the stop-start, I mean, like Carlos said, like, hopefully people don't come back positive for coronavirus, because then that makes it more complicated.
Yeah.
So, like, they can't make that match a priority. I just don't think there's an option to make it a priority. The roster for that match will be the best they can pull together for that match. Kind of all they can really do at this point, sadly. Harmless Bunny says, will players who have option declined in the next week still be with the team for the CCL? They don't know. I think if the player wants to play, Carlos opened that door that they could potentially play in the match, but they're going to have to figure out something with the league, MLSPA on a short-term contract. I don't know. Like, that's the thing, is there's no way to know because this has never happened before. And it doesn't sound like the club's getting a lot of information just yet here on this. Shula Sean chimes in on the Twitch pitch about our first hour conversation about the lower divisions, English FA, everything going on.
Right.
Says, I don't know how the government goes about allocating funds or prioritizing who gets what. My only offering would be opening up some of the viewing/listening avenues outside of the UK for more championship and FA Cup matches that would funnel some money, albeit not enough to cover the lost receipts, to these non-Premier League sides. Even using VPN, I couldn't listen to my ancestral club, Kings Lynn, in the FA Cup. Yeah, that's a really good point, and they need to figure that out. Like, especially while fans are not able to attend, they need to take every opportunity to make these games available for a cost. And if it's $3, if it's $5, like Shula Sean would have probably paid, and I'm getting into Shula Sean's wallet now, which is a bad idea. Shula Sean, I'm going to wager that you would have paid $5 to be able to watch Kings Lynn in the FA Cup. A one-camera shoot that they probably were filming anyway for scouting purposes, for evaluation purposes. A one-camera shoot, hopefully not the AI camera that got focused on the AR's bald head, but somebody running the camera. And even just that, even without a commentary track, just to be able to watch it, or just an audio track, just a radio-style call, there are people who would pay a little bit of money for that. It's not going to be a ton. Maybe it pays a player's wages for a month. Maybe it adds up to something more than that. It helps. It's better than zero.
Yes.
So, yeah, I totally agree. They have to figure out some outside-the-box ways to bring in some revenue for some of these clubs, for some of these situations. They have to open these things up. The pay-per-view thing that the Premier League did was too much.
Yeah.
They need to make those games more accessible. We're talking about something different. For the smaller clubs, I think people understand, because a lot of people probably buy tickets to those games knowing they can't attend. They know that buying a ticket is like making a donation in a lot of ways. So, okay, if they're going to have the chance to watch their small team play and it can help that small team's books, yeah, they'll pay $5. That's a different conversation than paying $20 to watch Newcastle and West Brom stink it up for 90 minutes.
Woof.
Yeah, I picked one I thought would be bad.
Hey, that's a solid pick. A couple of
bad.
Franco thoughts here on Twitter.
Yeah, let's get to that real quick.
John Nason, he said he wanted to know if we'd already discussed what the second yellow for Franco was for. Anything from the ref report? Well, he definitely said something to Elfath after the tackle. It's listed in the box score as dissent.
Could be it. I thought the yellow, and some of this is down to us not being there too, because it all happened really fast and it wasn't linear. Like the camera didn't stick with that situation. I thought Franco was walking away before I saw any dissent, but I didn't see what happened immediately after the tackle. He could have said something right after the tackle and after the whistle was called. I mean, Nagby was looking for the call. Nagby knew what he was doing. He's not the only one who does this. This is not a slam on Darlington Nagby, but he draws contact. He goes down and grabs the ball. He's trying to he's forcing the referee to make a call, either a handball for grabbing the ball or a foul on Escobar. The foul goes against Escobar. Maybe Escobar immediately said something, got a second yellow. Don't know what he said, so it's hard to judge. I would hope that if he got a second yellow there, that he really said something that deserved it.
Make it worth it.
I hope that it wasn't just a minor, nothing kind of second yellow. I don't know. There's no way to know. So, yeah, I haven't seen it. I don't think the tackle was the yellow. There was contact with Nagbe's foot, but, I mean, Nagbe was the way he stretched out, his foot was out. There's really nothing Franco could do to avoid it, I didn't think.
Yeah.
If it's listed as dissent, then it's not about the tackle. It's about something that was said after the tackle. I don't know how much time there was to say anything. It would have been pretty quick. So that's all I know at this point.
Yeah, John says he definitely said something to Elfath after the tackle. I'm with you, not sure that tackle alone was worthy of the yellow.
No, I mean, it was fast, whatever he said. Like, now, I know he said something after that, but from what I remember, he was already walking off, which would have meant he had already been shown a yellow when I saw any kind of back and forth. So the yellow would have had to come right after the tackle. He must have said something when the whistle blew, is my guess. I don't know. Again, it's the way we saw it. It's kind of hard to even speculate.
Yeah. And then Daniel on Escobar, he says, with how Escobar's been playing for us and the way he feels on the pitch, I hope he knows we really appreciate it. He's a player who plays with his heart on his sleeve. I love what he brings, and to me, with how he shows the love for this team, captain material in my book.
Keep letting him know you appreciate it. I don't know. Maybe it's just the difference in different countries. Look, Franco tweeted it to tell you guys what happened from his point of view. Respond to him. Tell him. He needs to know that. I don't think there was enough of that this season.
Yeah.
I don't think the players felt supported enough. Let him know. Tell him. Because, I mean, he's got decisions to make about his long-term future, too. I mean, he's got hopes and dreams. If he had an opportunity to go to Europe, he would probably love it. I think he does love his time here in Atlanta. I think he has no issues at all with being in Atlanta, but he's got decisions to make about his future. Tell him he's appreciated. Make sure he knows that. Those things are important. I mean, it's been hard this year because you guys haven't been in the stands to show that, but yeah, he opened the door to talk to you guys on social media, so tell him how you feel. Because players need to know those things. I think they needed to know that more this season. Because they heard criticism. Mm-hmm. Like you don't go look for it, but when you're not playing well, you know it's there. And if you start to see it, it can bother you. It can affect you. Like, coaches and athletes will tell you, we don't read the papers. They do. Everybody does. So they saw all of that. And that's coming from media. That's coming from fans. That's coming from a lot of different directions. Show them something good, too. If you want them to know, tell them. That's just that simple.
Gunnar Soros has made his triumphant return to the Emirates. He actually posted a picture about a half hour ago from the pitch there. So he is back on the job at Arsenal.
Are we sure that's not Mesut Ozil in the costume?
It is listed under the Gunnar Soros Twitter account. There is no independent confirmation as to who is inside Gunnar Soros's outfit. So it could very well be Mesut Ozil trying to sneak his way onto the pitch in some form for Arsenal.
Well, good that Mesut Ozil wanted to make sure that Gunnar Soros was not made redundant by Arsenal. And if he has to play the role of Gunnar Soros, then at least he's doing something to contribute to the team.
Mm-hmm.
Shiva on the Twitch pitch, I wonder if the front office will negotiate contracts differently this go-around. A lot of contracts expired at the same time this past go-round, and there was for a lot of roster turnover. Some of that was unavoidable because you were in the start of the club. You sign a bunch of contracts at the same time, you're going to have a bunch of contracts that come up at the same time. There's just no way around that. Now it's easier. So that part, I think, can be avoided. You're not going to sign a player you want for 5 years to 3 to try to have them not come up at the same time as somebody else. If you want to sign them to 5, you're going to sign them to 5. Because you'll make a transfer before the 5th year, and in some cases anyway. So you got to think about it that way. When you start a club, you're going to have a lot of contracts come up at the same time. Also, something that was said that I think was very important. Carlos has reiterated this again. It's come up before about you don't ever want to mortgage your future for 1 year of success. You have to think long term, and you have to think about what a move you made last offseason means for this upcoming offseason and the next one and the next one. You know, he's talked about it from the perspective of not blocking talented academy players like George Bello, making sure there's somewhere for them to play. You have to balance that out. Also, I think it came up in the realm of they had a feeling, and it proved to be correct because they won MLS Cup in 2018. I think they also had a feeling that Miguel Almiron was done at the end of that year and they were going to make the sale because they'd probably at least gotten far enough along to know our numbers are going to be met here. We don't know where, we don't know who it's going to go to, how this is going to get done, but he's going to be sold. They'd already started talking to Pitti, so we're connecting dots here looking back. They might have kept things together a little bit longer in 2018. They might have kept some people around in 2018 because they knew how close they were to winning a title. They didn't want to mortgage that future going forward after the 2019 season, going into this one, because you didn't want to sign guys to long-term deals that you didn't like those numbers. And, I mean, Julian Gressel was one of those. Julian Gressel wanted a long-term deal here for a lot more money than he was making. According to reports in D.C., he got that deal. It's too much, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. It's too much based off the year he had this year, which, again, is a crazy year. But he didn't produce as much as he did here, let alone what they're paying him for now. So you've got to think you can't let the fan favorite thing, because this comes up a lot, and a lot of people say it's a justifiable reason for being angry about moves is that they got rid of fan favorites. That word doesn't come up in these decisions. It can't. Because fan favorite doesn't mean best player. It doesn't mean most impactful player. It doesn't mean best value. It means the fans like them. Do you want to get rid of every player the fans like? No. You also expect that the fans are going to like the players who are producing the most. They should, you would think. So those things should be in alignment. But this idea that you can't get rid of a player because the fans like them it's not real. It doesn't exist. Because that doesn't come up as part of the evaluation. If a player wants a larger contract and you feel like they are not worth the amount of money they are asking for, and they don't want to come down on that number to match the number that you're offering, then you got to move on. And you got to do it at a time when you can bring assets back into the club. And that's what they did this year, is I think they made decisions on players not just for 1 year, but for the next few years. And where they made moves, they brought assets back into the club to help the club get better going forward. Again, I don't think they're far off when you look at this roster going into next year. And we know there'll be some differences in it, but I don't think they're that far off. We'll see. Katie Weaver says, I know there's lots of discontent with additions not measuring up, but not sure the club/fan base can handle another roster rebuild after dealing so many players last year. I don't think there's any hint of a roster rebuild. I don't even know where that came up because they said there wasn't. I don't know where that's even coming from. There's not. It's not going to happen unless players get transferred out, which are unexpected. But that's soccer. And again, it's got to be about the long-term future of the club. You can't make decisions based off the fans lost players they liked last year, so we can't make this move that is a good move for the player and for the club. Let's pull a hypothetical here. Let's say Celta Vigo. They just hired a new manager. And he is Argentine. Let's say Celta Vigo has a very limited budget, and they say, man, we need an extra defender. We really like this Franco Escobar in Atlanta. He's good age. We think we can work with him. We're going to give him double his salary to come here, and we're going to offer the club $6 million. I'm making this up, understand?
Yeah.
If that comes to fruition, you're doing Franco a disservice. You're doing the club a disservice to not take that deal. The fans would not be happy. Some would. Some would be happy because some people think he is a a bad character to have because he gets yellow cards. That's split. It's split more towards supporting Franco, I believe, I hope.
Yeah.
But that can't factor into the decision. It can't factor into for Franco. If he has the opportunity to make more money and to move to Spain, which has probably been a dream for him, you have to make it happen. So there are things about the way you build rosters in the sport that are outside of your control of this, and you can't factor this in. I don't think the intention is to have a year of a roster rebuild. Nobody said that it was. I don't think you need to. But could opportunities come that make you have to do things differently? Yeah, like Pity Martinez, for example.
Yeah.
You couldn't say no to that deal for him, let alone for the club. You couldn't tell him, well, we know that you're going to make 3 or 4 times what you're making here, and you're going to set yourself up for quite a long time, and you want this deal, but we're going to say no.
Yeah.
It's not the right way to do business, in my opinion. So we will see. We will see.
No, because then how are you viewed in the world theater if you don't do the player a solid by wanting to move him on to a place where he thinks he can get generational money and help his family out and all these other aspects that are tied to it? If you say no, how does that make you look to other clubs in the future if you want to do business on an international scale?
That comes up if the player or the agent gripes about it. You know, not everybody knows every piece of business, but if you don't help the player out with the move that they want there, and they're here and they're unhappy, you're probably going to have things that are said about that unhappiness, and it could come from an agent outside of the club, and you're probably not going to get the greatest performance from the player who's not happy. Yep. So it doesn't help you on any front here. So it's tough. Jason Nick says, do you think they will be able to buy Moreno down to a TAM deal? I know it's impossible to know, but your thoughts? Yeah, I think they will. I just don't know when. Just from what we know, or what has been reported anyway on the Argentine side of all this, the numbers that were out there, I think you can make them work to get him down to a TAM deal. I don't know if it's this year. I don't know where the escalators and where things fit in all of it. So I do think it will happen. The club has said that it could happen. They've opened the door to it, which I don't think they would have done if it was impossible. So I think it can. I just don't know if it's this year that it can. It might be next year. Some of it's down to just, again, the way the contract's structured and the way the maximum amount for a designated player goes up too in the CBA, because it rises every year. I just don't know where the magic number fits here. So we'll have to wait and see. Let's see. Tesco said, Carlos saying they only started the same 11 twice all year and it gave them an opportunity to look at everyone in different situations was interesting to me. Do you think that was by design? No, he wasn't saying it that way. He was saying, again, talking about a positive coming out of a negative. It's hard when you can't start a consistent lineup. They didn't do that by design. They did that because of injuries. They did that because they couldn't, because of fatigue. It gave them an opportunity to see different combinations. It gave them an opportunity to see Emerson Hyndman play with Marcelino Moreno, to play with Mateo Sosechu, to play with Mo Adams. So you got to see which combinations work. It gave you more information to work with, but it was not the design, because for a team to be its best, you want some consistency. You weren't able to get that. You didn't have your first choice 11 start one game this year. And you didn't have back-to-back starting lineups that were the same except for twice. It happened one time where you had the same 11 back-to-back. That's not good to get results, but it is good when you're evaluating players making decisions going forward, because you have more information to work with. That's right. What it is. Anything else on Twitter?
Yes.
Okay, what do we got?
Michael Head came in this morning, and he says there's a table in an Athletic article on Newcastle yesterday, and it brought a smile to his face. Nice to see my club on a list with such iconic sides. And it is a list of the top 50 clubs by average attendance. And Atlanta United, number 10 on the list, ahead of Borussia Mönchengladbach, Manchester City, and Newcastle United.
Yeah, I mean, and that's going back to 2019 because welcome to COVID.
True, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the type of reach and conversation you're having here. So it's absolutely accurate. Like, Atlanta's attendance, MLS's attendance as a whole, and that's boosted by Atlanta, but Atlanta's attendance is like head-turning worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
They play in a huge venue. That helps. They play in a bigger venue than some teams have. Yep. But that's a credit to what has been built here to be in that conversation, 100%.
And then also on the board, part of our USL discussion this morning, Tafka linked to an article by Sam Karp at Sports Pro, where Sam caught up with Jake Edwards. Mm-hmm. And it was a tough season for
head of the USL, if you don't know Jake Edwards.
Right, the head of USL. And some of the numbers that Jake brought out in the interview, 500% increase in USL viewership on ESPN+, 39% follower growth across all of social media from 2019, and the value of getting the USL Championship and USL League One back out to play. 80% of corporate sales revenue USL clubs saved by returning to play.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they did it. You're looking at how you minimize the losses. Mm-hmm. That's the issue is you're losing the gate revenue in a lot of cases, although USL was able to get some people back in the buildings. What else can you minimize? And by playing, you minimize the corporate side. You minimize the sponsorship losses. You minimized any losses you would have given back to ESPN. You might have still had to give some back because you didn't play a full schedule, but I don't know those details. That's why they did it. And we wondered if they would be able to do it. Look, ultimately at the end, they weren't able to have the championship matches in League One or the championship. That's a real shame. That would have been a fitting cap to a good year for USL. It's still a good year.
Yeah.
But that is the black eye on it. And that's the shame here is that you weren't able to have those championships. There's nothing they could do. I mean, I guess you could have postponed the USL Championship final back, but could you have made it work with TV, with cost, with travel? I don't know. I don't know those details. But USL did the best they could. MLS has done the best that they can. The Premier League, the Championship, every league in the world is doing the best they can right now. Everybody's struggling. We'll get into Barcelona's financial issues in a minute, and a lot of these were pre-pandemic, and they just got blown up by the pandemic, but Barcelona is looking at potentially going bankrupt. Like, that's not a joke. Like, that's real. The financial implications of all this are not going away. So where USL was able to keep some money in their pocket that they would have had to give back, and yes, they played, so they had some expenses, but if it was financially viable for them to play those games and get it done, then that's good because that's going to give them a better chance to survive. Because for leagues at that level, for teams at that level, it's survival. Reno 1868 wasn't able to survive. Hopefully there's not a whole lot of others that are in that boat.
Yeah.
It's about survival when you're at a smaller level. Absolutely. It's just about getting to the next day, getting to see when can people get in the building. Those things are real.
And, so anybody wants to go and see Sam's interview with Jake Edwards, it's at sportspromedia.com in their analysis section. So that's where that interview is posted. Did you see that DraftKings came out with the MLS Cup odds?
No, I did not. What do they have?
Okay. So let me go from largest to smallest.
No. Go from who are the favorites.
Oh, come on.
I don't need to know. I don't need to know Miami, what their number is. I don't need to know
Plus
that. They're not
20,000.
going to win. They're not winning anything. Let's talk about who's going to win. Start from the top. We're not building through 70 billion teams that are in the playoffs.
All right. Philadelphia is a plus 350, and this is courtesy of our friends at DraftKings.
They're the favorite?
They are the favorite.
Okay, I'm surprised. All right.
Seattle plus 450.
Okay.
LAFC plus 500. Basically, yes.
They're the 7th seed. They got to go to Seattle in the first round.
Uh-huh.
What is the world is this blind love for LAFC?
I don't know.
for all the talk that everybody was all up on Atlanta and loved Atlanta and they got so much unfair treatment in the national media, they never got treated like this. LAFC was the 7th team in the Western Conference.
Mm-hmm. And number 3 on the board.
And they're the number 3 team on the board. The team that won the West hasn't come up yet in Sporting Kansas City.
That is correct.
Portland, the team that won the MLS's back tournament, hasn't come up yet. But
That
LAFC is a bigger favorite than everybody? Throw your money away on that one. I'm sorry. That's a joke.
Number 4, Orlando City at plus 600.
Wow. That's a surprise. That's a surprise. Toronto should be kind of angry about that.
Number 5 is not Toronto.
Okay.
Actually, it's a tie for number 5. At plus 700, it is NYC and Toronto. They're both at plus 700.
NYC's playing well here at the end, but Toronto should be ahead of NYC and Orlando, in my opinion.
So, are we to the point where you're putting Thanksgiving accoutrement on things yet, or are we
No, we're not putting anything on anything yet. What's next?
Sporting at plus 800. They are at number 7.
Okay.
Portland at plus 1100. They are at number 8.
There go the Yams. Plus 1,100 for Portland. I think it's a Philadelphia-Portland final. I think Philadelphia wins. But if I'm throwing Yams around on something, then yeah, it's Portland.
Number 9, Columbus is at plus 1,800.
No, they didn't play well down the stretch.
Number 10, Minnesota United at plus 3,000.
Nobody else is winning. We can stop. Nobody else is winning. Portland is the last one that I think is a real contender.
And they are 8th on the board at plus 1,100.
Yeah, I think that's a good number. I think they get to the final. I'll take Gio and Portland to get through the gauntlet in the West. Sporting will be difficult. Seattle will be difficult. I think Seattle beats LAFC. But I think Portland does it. So if it's a Philadelphia-Portland final, that's the way I'm going. I think Philadelphia wins. I think they've been the best team all year. But Portland at those kind of odds, yeah, I'll throw some Yams on it.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely, when I saw Toronto at 700 and Portland at plus 1,100, I'm like, oh, hello.
I don't think Toronto gets there. I don't think they get through Philly.
No, I think that Philly's the top team in the East, but looking at Portland at plus 1,100, that was the thing that stood out to me, and Sporting at plus 800.
Yep. J-Dub on the Twitch pitch is asking you if frog in a skillet is a new phrase. He's never heard it, and he hangs out with a lot of old people who love old sayings, yet never heard it.
Well, it's just as we explained, I think it's just a carryover of putting a frog in a frying pan. And so,
were you thinking the frying pan analogy, or were you thinking the pot of boiling water analogy?
I was thinking the pot of boiling water analogy.
Okay, because I've heard that one far more often. But when I was looking for this, because I was like, man, did I just never hear it that way?
No, I probably made it up.
No, there were people who talked about the same analogy, but a frog in a frying pan. I never saw a frog in a skillet, which, again, I think was the Valdosta influence.
And I'll stipulate to that, yes.
And I kind of like that better. So there you go. The analogy, do you want to explain the analogy for people who've never heard the analogy in any form?
Well, it's if you put a frog in a pot of water and you turn the heat on gradually, the frog won't realize that he's boiling to death. But if you put a frog in an already boiling pot of water, he'll jump out immediately.
The frog will adjust to the rising heat, but won't know that it's in danger.
Right.
Okay.
That's where it came from.
There we go. Frog in a skillet is John's spin on the analogy, J-Dub.
Yes. And
I do like that you said you hang out with a lot of old people who love old sayings, but you've never heard the one that John brought up. That was good. I like that. That was fun.
Yeah. Because so go ahead and just throw me into that old person pile and. Oh yeah, right. I completely understood where he was going. And good morning, Nate.
That was funny. I got to get laugh out of that part.
No, that's solid. That's good. That I am an old person that just creates sayings out of thin air.
You twist them. You put it in a skillet, which was a good spin on it. That's for sure. A lot of talk about how Atlanta United doesn't have any leaks coming out of the front office. Tesco says they must have a no leaks bonus or something. It's crazy how little gets out. That's absolutely true. Harmless Bunny thinks that the lack of flying around to meet due to the pandemic has made it easier to keep the search under wraps. I think that's a really good take on that as well. Yeah. It's definitely, as Katie Weaver says, no one has hacked Darren's Zoom account, so they don't know who he's been talking to on Zoom.
No, and as much as we follow sports and aviation on Twitter, you can't see an Arthur Blank plane with a flight plan.
I don't think they've reported that one. They only report when teams travel. I don't think they're trying to get into the recruiting business. I don't think they're trying to get into that. A lot of talk about Miguel Herrera, who is not at risk of being fired by Club America anymore.
This week?
No, anymore.
Oh, okay.
When was the last time you heard anything about that?
It's just rumor, gossip, and innuendo.
No. That's not what I said. Don't try to spin it that way and confuse people. There has not been any talk about him getting fired at Club America for a while because they've been doing better. Correct? You're the CONCACAF. We didn't even have Conca Cinco last night because it got so excited.
I was ready for Conca Cinco last night, and because we went off the rails so long, I didn't even get the chance to talk about the Guardianes.
We didn't even get into it, but this is the latest from El Piojo. Is he said 6 days ago? He told Marca Claro that he has had no contact with the LA Galaxy. There were stories that came out that he was linked to the LA Galaxy job. Right. He told Marca Claro that he is focused on Club America, no contact with the Galaxy. Quote, I've always said that if I emigrate, my priority will be Europe, but I don't see MLS negatively because it is growing. So he's not going to leave Club America for an MLS job. He would leave Club America for a European job. If he does not have a job at Club America, then we're having a different conversation, and he doesn't see MLS negatively.
Right.
That's the latest. That was in the last week. Before that, I mean, he was in a spot where he was being, there was a lot of pressure on him for the way Club America was playing.
Finished third in the Guardianes.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah, so. They finished third, and there are articles, Soy Football, for example, Miguel Herrera is the best manager of the season. So he's not getting fired from Club America. No. And he's already said if he leaves of his own volition, he's going to Europe. So, again, that's another one that doesn't feel realistic right now. Just saying. Now, Katie brings up one that is realistic right now in Dome Tarrant.
Yes.
We have talked about him being out at Flamengo and what happened at Flamengo and results at Flamengo, which were pretty good. They gave up too many goals. That was a problem. They had some bad games where they got blown out, but they didn't lose very much at all. Now, Dome Tarrant is realistic because he's out of a job. He has worked in this league before with New York City. Let's go back and revisit, just so people who maybe aren't as familiar with Senor Tarrant and what he has been up to. So, Dome is 58 years old, Spanish. He joined Pep Guardiola's staff at Barca B when Pep had his first year of being a manager. Dome joined the staff initially as an analyst. When the team got promoted, they were in the third division. Pep took that job to get them promoted to the second division. Accomplished it. Then the first team moved on from Frank Rijkaard. Guardiola got the hire. Dome Tarrant went up to the first team with Pep. And he became more than just an analyst. He became his assistant. He became his right-hand man. A lot of different stories in the books on Pep's time at Bayern Munich and beginning at Manchester City, where Dome played some very key roles in those teams. A lot of work on set pieces, a lot of work on defensive structure. He was a real sounding board for Pep Guardiola. He saw the game in the same way. He's talked about it. That's why he went to work with Pep. They saw the game in the same way. That's pretty good. Pep's done pretty well for himself. So to be along those lines, that's pretty good stuff. So, okay, when you look at as a manager, because he had managed before he went to join Pep. I think that sometimes is forgotten. He had managed at small clubs in Spain. Before he went to Pep, it was at Girona, which is a club that's very important to him. That's where he was prior to joining Barcelona B. So then when he went to New York City, he managed 60 games during his time there. He replaced Patrick Vieira mid-season 2018, managed through the end of the 2019 season. In those 60, they won 29, lost 16, drew 15. Number one team in the 2019 season in the Eastern Conference in the regular season. At Flamengo, managed 26 over like 100 days, again, because Brazilian football is insane. And the amount of games you're playing right now is insane. So he's managing games every 4 days in the time he was there. They won 15 of 26. They lost 6. They drew 5. And that's in all competitions. The number that people will point to as the problem at Flamengo is not the 46 goals in 26 games. That part's good. It's the 38 goals conceded. That's okay, a little high in 26 games. Is that a trend? Let's look back at New York City. 60 games. Scored 104 goals. Not quite 2 a game, but that's pretty good. Conceded 76. It's better, but it's still more than a goal a game. That's a little high. That's a little high. Girona was better during his last run there, where he managed 51 games. He won 29. He lost 10. He scored 94 goals. He allowed 50, right under 1 per game. Okay, so maybe... All right, the defensive questions, you look back at his smaller clubs, it's hard to compare. His teams have given up some goals, but they've scored some goals. He subscribes to the way that Pep sees the game in terms of positional theory, and it's not based on only 4-3-3. I mean, he'll change formations around. He'll move players around. I'm trying to think of some of the things at New York City that we saw that were a little surprising. James Sands playing in the back, in a back 3. That caught people by surprise. It worked out pretty well. Moving some of the pieces around. He got frustrated with not getting what he wanted going into the 2019 season. He talked about how Eber was like their 9th or 10th option in that signing for a new forward. He didn't get what he wanted quick enough. Still had a good year. He got frustrated. He left. Franchise record, 64 points in 2019. Went to Flamengo, did well, but again, Brazilian football is crazy. He said that they won the Copa Libertadores by luck. Players got mad. They lost their last 2 games 4-0 and 4-1, and that was enough to say adios. So now he's available. He is realistic because he's managed in the league. Does he want to go back to Europe? Maybe. Does he want to go rejoin up with Pep? I don't think so. Pep recently, I think, gave an interview in Brazil and defended him and talked about how prepared he is, how good he is, how thorough he is. Pep has backed him in a big way, and Pep doesn't do that just to do it out of loyalty. That's really not been his MO. So, could Dome Toronto work here? Yeah, I think he could. I think he has the attacking mentality that the club would want. I think he would like to play fast and fluid in the way that the club wants. He could absolutely work. So, is he available? Is he interested in the job? We don't know. Just got fired. Probably not very happy about it. Does he want some time off? All right, maybe. Would he take a call right now? I'd like to think that he would take a call right now. I don't know that for sure. Talking to Glenn Crooks, radio voice for New York City, who had a chance to talk to Dome a good bit, I think Glenn really came to appreciate Dome. And I've noticed that with the time at not just Glenn, but the Spanish language side too. It feels like the people who got a chance to get to know him enjoyed talking soccer with him. Can he be a little prickly? I got that sense. There were some people who said that in New York City media. But can he do the job as a coach? Yeah. I mean, he won the Eastern Conference in the regular season in 2019. That's a pretty good sign that he can have success in this league. And you give him more of you give him what he wants if he asks for a certain type of player and it doesn't take 8 or 9 options to get there. And I don't think it would here. That doesn't seem to be something that's been a problem in Atlanta United's history. Yeah, he could be a good fit. We don't know what he wants. We don't know how much money he would want. Don't know what he would want in terms of, does he want to go back to Europe? Does he want to, keep at it? Does he want to come back to MLS? No idea. He's had nothing but good things to say about his time in MLS. I think he would be receptive, and he is all of a sudden available. So it'll be very interesting to see how this goes. Katie said, I'm not sure if I'm for it. Ricky brought up he's out at Flamingo. I do not think it would be a bad fit at all. The questions would be, what happened at Flamingo? Tell us from your side how it went down.
Yeah.
Defensively, are there things that you've learned at Flamingo or the things that you've learned at New York City that you would do differently here? For the gist of it, now our squad's a little different than it was when you played us, but what we're trying to do. What we've had in the past. He lived the Barcelona life for a while too. He wasn't a Barcelona lifer like Pep was, but he lived the Barcelona life like Tata Martino did, like Frank de Boer did. So there's going to be some commonality there. Are you interested? Let's chat. I don't know in terms of like work visas and that kind of stuff, but just the fact he was here in 2019, maybe that's a little bit easier too. It could work. It'd be a very interesting one, but you got to sit down and talk, and you got to see if you see things the same way and see if you can be on the same page. Could be very interesting.
Pacine says on the Twitch pitch, imagine what he could accomplish with an adult-sized home field.
That's also true because he wasn't really able to play, I think, the soccer that he wanted to at Yankee Stadium. He adapted and made them, obviously they won the Eastern Conference, a good team. But he had to adapt to play on that size of a pitch. You get him into something like this where you're playing at the Benz, you can play fast, you can play open, you can play the kind of soccer that we have seen from Pep Guardiola teams that Dome Tarrant has been a big part of. So, yeah, it could be really, really interesting. Also, I mean, look, I don't think Dome Tarrant leaving is the exact same reason that Pep Guardiola's results have slipped a little bit, but the timing kind of goes down that road. And Pep's had nothing but good things to say about Dome Tarrant and what he brought to his projects, his capabilities, his qualifications. He has always talked up Dome. I mean, they have a great relationship, so that's not a bad thing to have either. It's a very interesting development. There was some chatter previously, and I think this needs to be understood. I do not believe that Dome Tarrant would have walked away from Flamingo to join Atlanta United or the LA Galaxy or anybody else in MLS. That option never presented itself because he was fired, because Brazilian football is crazy. They've fired 14 managers in 20 rounds of the Brasileiro. That's a lot. That's more than most leagues. I don't think he would have left. It's the same as Miguel Herrera. I don't see Miguel Herrera leaving Club America to join Atlanta or LA Galaxy. If he was fired, then we're having a different conversation. That's the conversation we're having about Dome Tarrant now. He would not have left Flamingo, in my opinion, where they were, third in the Brasileiro, going into the knockouts of the Copa Libertadores, the Cup in Brazil as well, which is a big deal, being in the quarterfinals. I don't think he's walking away from that to join an MLS club. That option was taken away from him. He has to walk away. Now we're having a different conversation.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of other conversation about Dome and the Twitch pitch. We were officially caught up on Twitter, and let's see, what did Byrne say on the Twitch pitch? Byrne says he gets the feeling that he won't like the scouting/roster makeup here if he wasn't happy with NYC's.
That's some weird speculation, Byrne, that I don't think is necessarily fair. The complaint he had at New York City wasn't about the way the scouting was done. It was about getting a deal done. It took forever for them to get Eber. And he wasn't their first, second, third, fourth, fifth. I think he said like 8th or 9th, maybe 9th or 10th.
Yeah, I remember that. Like 9th or 10th.
Like they couldn't get a deal done with all of the other options. That's different. Like that's never been an issue in Atlanta. I can't think of very many situations where you heard about they're negotiating with this guy, they can't get a deal done. I mean, it hasn't happened very much. Once they zero in on somebody that they think they can get and they identify, they're generally getting them in Atlanta. So that was the frustration. It wasn't about the scouting department. It was about pulling the trigger on a deal and getting the forward that they needed. So those are two different things. And I know Bernd has questioned some of the signings coming into this season. We've had the conversation, and it doesn't need to keep being had. Like I think this year's a hard one to judge anybody coming into this team in this league, and some of the injuries that some of the signings did have coming in made it even harder. We'll have to see next year because, there's going to be pressure on players. Again, there's pressure on the club to perform better than they did this year. There's nothing wrong with that. That's real. That's being a top club. But Dome's complaints were not based around the complaints people have had about the acquisitions this season. They were based on, I don't have a forward. I need somebody because we went down the list and you can't get a deal done with anybody. Get me a striker. Because early last season, I remember he was having to get real creative with what they did up top.
And Burnt in the conversation in the Twitch pitch. And this is and I finally got to see my Roger Goodell photo.
Is that why you went to the Twitch pitch? So you could see that? Nice.
That was initially why I went into the Twitch pitch, to see the photo of me looking like a fat Roger Goodell. But
I will let you get caught up on the Twitch pitch then. I'll try to keep going.
Yeah, because we're caught up on the Twitters.
Okay.
And the Q20, hearing the numbers on Toronto has me rethinking. He has the advantage of MLS and knowing how what matters most more than other leagues. See the success of Schmetzer, Bradley, Curtin, etc.
What? I'm confused completely as to what you're talking about.
Well, no, just hearing the numbers on Torrent has the Q20 rethinking. Torrent has the advantage of
the what?
It says hearing the numbers.
Who is okay? Please speak English. Who is saying this?
The Q20.
The Q20. That is Katie Weaver. This is why you don't hang out on the Twitch pitch, John.
No, this is why I don't hang out on the Twitch pitch. Katie Weaver. Hearing the numbers on Torrent has me rethinking. He has the advantage of MLS know-how, what matters most more than in other leagues. See the success of Schmetzer, Bradley, Curtin, etc.
Yeah. MLS is a little unique. It is good to have somebody who would check off a lot of your other boxes on the hire, but also has experience in the league. You haven't had that before. Tata didn't have that experience. Frank didn't have that experience. They had to learn on the fly. I think they both did. But Dome would have that experience. He'd know exactly what he's facing. I mean, he faced these teams not that long ago, so he would know what Toronto is all about. He would know, what Philadelphia is all about. He'd have to get caught up a little bit, of course. But, yes, he would have a pretty good understanding of how the game's played. He'd know how the game gets refereed here. He'd know how hard the travel is. All those things that are a challenge for newcomers, he would have. He would absolutely have. Bernd, I'll take back over from the Twitch pitch, John. You're going to get us in trouble with the Twitch pitch.
Go for it.
I can already see where this is going. Me, Katie. Yes, thank you, Katie.
Me, Katie. Thank you.
I never thought of you as the Q20 because I'm thinking of a Q as a letter, and I'm like, what? Who? What is that? Some statistic that I don't know what he's talking about?
KEW20. So it's Katie wear a mask. That's who that is.
JW. John on the Twitch pitch is like a fish trying to ride a bike. That's another T-shirt.
About right.
That might be on the back side of the Frog in a Skillet. Burns says, as a positive, I think Dome could work together better with the front office to define what he needs than FDB. I think that's a really good point. In Pep's clubs, the coaches are more involved in the team building, not making the final call, which I think sometimes gets a little confused, but definitely involved in recruitment and identification and in being more specific as to what they need. And I think from hearing some of the comments that Frank has given, not trying to look for hearsay, but some of the things that Frank has said, maybe it wasn't. And Frank said maybe he wasn't giving the players enough information at times. Is it fair to connect the dots to say maybe he wasn't giving the front office enough detail in what he wanted in some of the signings. Potentially. That won't be the case. Doesn't mean it will be a list and say, here, sign 1, 2, and 3, or I'm walking. That's what Bielsa does. Bielsa will say that he wants these players signed, but he will have already done a lot of the work to know that they can be signed. And he also at least wants an honest effort. This is why he left, I think it was Lazio, because Bielsa gave them a list of players that I believe his people had already talked to, knew that were interested, knew that were attainable. He gave them that list. Lazio said, yeah, we couldn't get any of them done. Bielsa went back and talked to these people and said, no, we never heard from Lazio. So he's like, I can't trust you. I'm out. That's a different conversation. I think Dome would give a very specific, he would look at the team. He would say, I want a number 6 who can do X, Y, Z. Here are some examples. Boom. Instead of, I need a backup forward who's like Joseph. Well, that's not very reasonable. What are you looking for? What do you want from a secondary forward here? Maybe that specificity would really help in terms of the recruitment. That could be really big. If you're still on the Twitch pitch, Shiva says hi, by the way.
Let me see. Hang on.
What?
Oh, no, I'm waiting get this. It says, welcome back. It looks like you're trying to log in from a new device or location. As an added security measure, please enter the 6-digit code we sent to your email.
Are you trying?
I'm waiting on that 6-digit code.
Oh, jeez. John's already broken himself on the Twitch pitch.
No, the computer is.
Oh, of course, you're going to blame it on the computer.
Ultra computer.
It's called safety, John. It's called internet security. It's a big thing these days.
Jason, I'm in Valdosta. Jason Nix, I'm in Valdosta on a shoot for Georgia Public Broadcasting, and we're talking to a coach that's going to be on the GPB platforms over the next handful of weeks. So that's why it's there.
When are you talking to said coach?
After the show is over and I change clothes and check out of the hotel.
Do you need to leave right this minute?
That wouldn't be a bad idea.
Okay, then let's start wrapping up. That's why I wasn't sure what time. That's why I was asking. I wasn't sure what time you had to go.
Kevsey, I am not giving all of my information. No, I'm not giving you my last 4 social or my birthday. I'll give you the pet. That's easy. You can see Trooper on my Facebook page.
Kefsey, don't get John banned from Twitch like Neymar got banned from Twitch, okay? Be careful.
Neymar.
Be careful. Very quick rundown on some news and notes to keep an eye on over the next 24 hours or so till we're back with a show. And actually, warning for tomorrow, might not be a morning show tomorrow. I've got a bunch of stuff that is piling up for different projects at the end of the week, and there might not be a way to make them all fit properly. If we don't have a morning show, we will have an early evening show. So early warning, that might happen, and I apologize, and that's just the way it's going in 2020 because welcome to 2020.
Welcome to 2020.
All right.
No, it is not Rush Probst.
Oh, good. News updates. Jack Wilshere could be coming to MLS next year, according to the Daily Record. He has not ruled out that he would wait to sign a deal because he is a free agent to wait to join an MLS team for 2021. So keep an eye on Jack Wilshere. He has reportedly turned down an opportunity to go to the A-League in Australia. So he could come to MLS. He hasn't ruled that down. Rangers, it doesn't look like they've got the amount of minutes for him to play. So he's not looking at going to Rangers. That was a possibility at one point. Vero Boquete, who is an outstanding Spanish midfielder on the women's side, is joining AC Milan's women's team. Will wear the number 87 shirt in Milan. That's a really good signing. Vero Boquete is one of my favorite players.
Yep.
You've got the Swiss bank implicated in FIFA corruption investigations has agreed to a settlement in principle with the U.S. Department of Justice, set aside $79.7 million to pay expected fines. Boof. Good times. In Hungary, they were going to have fans. They're not going to have fans now for the European Championship playoff game on Thursday. They would have had 18,000 fans. They are not going to have them because the Hungarian government has announced new restrictions to cope with coronavirus pandemic. The Danish Soccer Federation has put 8 national team players and some staff members in quarantine after 2 positive tests for COVID. They're going to miss the friendly against Sweden tomorrow. They're going to hope that they are available for Nations League games against Iceland and Belgium next week, starting on the weekend. It's gotten really weird with Italy, and this has complicated a lot of different national teams. So Roma and Fiorentina were 2 clubs. There were a few others that players were barred from leaving the country to play in international games because of COVID infections at the clubs. Fiorentina's director of sport, Daniele Prade, said that the local health authority prevented players from leaving, but a FIFA notice obliged them to be allowed to leave. And he said, I didn't understand anything. He doesn't know who to answer to. He said, yesterday the ASL said that we are in quarantine until November 14th, but we also received a notice of FIFA that says the players are obliged to leave. There's a lack of clarity. We don't know who to answer to. We will try to take all the right steps for the situation. We wait as events evolve. 3 players who were caught up in this are headed to Chile. Alexis Sanchez, Arturo Vidal, Eric Pulgar. They were ultimately allowed to travel on private flights, it sounds like, is what they were able to do. They're all making this up as they go, basically. So just wait and see what games get canceled, what games get played, who is allowed to play. Yeah, it's madness.
Mm-hmm.
The Barca thing, we'll get more on it for tomorrow, but the meetings to negotiate salary reductions are back underway. 190 million euros, what they got to cut. In the event that it is not achieved, the club may enter bankruptcy proceedings. And Cadena Ser, there were questions of one of their contributors of what that could actually mean. Payment obligations are paralyzed. A bankruptcy trustee oversees the club and analyzes why the bankruptcy has taken place. Finally, the debt that they have is renegotiated. In the event that no payment agreement is reached, the entity would go into liquidation and sell the assets to be distributed among creditors. Now, they say Barcelona has some pretty special things about them, being one of the biggest soccer clubs in the world. So they're not going to be liquidated. You don't have to worry about Barcelona being liquidated like Warehouse Music was.
There you go.
I went through liquidation running a store. It was not fun. Barcelona's not going to be dealing with that.
Could you imagine Mike Ashley picking up Barca for pennies on the dollar?
Oh, he would. Barcelona has a total debt of 820 million euro, according to Cadena Ser. It gets better. In August of 2021, the club is due to repay more than 400 million of the debt. The contract with Goldman Sachs would mean increasing the club's liabilities to more than 1.6 billion. Oh. Yeah, that's where Barcelona is these days. It is no bueno at all. It is very, very bad. That's the big things. There's going to be a lot more going on here over the next couple of days as players report, as players test positive, as national team matches happen, as they don't happen. We'll keep you posted. We'll get deeper into the U.S. match with Wales. That's on Thursday. We'll get deeper into that tomorrow. We'll keep you updated on Barcelona, any agreements that become reached, anything with the Premier League and EFL and all that stuff. Anything else that happens with Atlanta United and MLS, we'll have all of that for you. John's got work to do. I got studying to do. I got lots of things. I got 2 college games on Friday to call, so I got to get caught up on the Sun Belt.
The Fun Belt.
It's going to be the Fun Belt, although we could have a lot of rain between now and then. It could be the Sloppy Belt, depending on how much rain we get. So we've got a lot of work to do. We'll be back in the morning, though. Hopefully, if not in the morning, we'll be back in the afternoon. So you just got to wait and stay tuned. It's a cliffhanger. We'll have to see what happens. But we'll be back soon. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for all the questions. Thanks for all the conversation. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha fat Roger Goodell, y'all.